How do you define programming? In this video, I'm going to walk you through what is programming for strength coaches and how do we go about making a program that is going to allow us to have the greatest amount of success no matter what athletes we're training, no matter what level we're training, no matter where we're at in our strength and conditioning journey. So, industry thoughts on programming, we have exercise selection, exercise order, frequency, volume, sets, reps, tempo, load itself. And you look to the right at this picture, we're going to see what most coaches think about programming. And we see the sets, we see the reps, we see the exercise. And this is a very simple and very easy Excel spreadsheet that someone has created. And it's very easy to see how this is what most of the time coaches think of when we think about programming. This is not what programming is. These are small parts of the overall arching theme of programming. These are the variables within programming. This isn't the definition of programming. So when we think about programming in general, we have to first have a working definition to be able to then scale these variables across any type of scenario or situation we have with athletes. So with problems with the current thoughts is programming is more than exercise selection and the variables we talked about earlier. Is more than today's social media where we see random exercises done all the time. No long-term progressions or tracking. No narrowed focus and adaptation. Misses large amounts of stress and accumulated fatigue that we want to see. So what is programming? Programming, and this is the definition of programming, is a structured, scalable, and measurable step-by-step systematic approach to optimizing adaptation. When we look at programming, there are four main components. We have structured, scalable, measurable, systematic. So when we think about programming, we're going to break down specifically what these four variables within this definition means. Structured programming. It's a roadmap. It's taking the athlete where they are today based off of the formal or informal assessments we've gone over before. If you haven't checked out that video, go check out my video on formal and informal assessments to give you a better understanding of where the athlete is going to start. When we think about structured programming, it's like typing in a destination on your phone. You take your phone out, you type in where you're at today, or it does it on its own, and then you tell it where it goes. And then it gives you multiple options. You could take one that has tolls, no tolls, fastest, quickest, less turns, more turns, however you want to do it. And this is the thing. When we think about structured programming, this also gives the athlete a variables to understand, hey, this is where I'm going. These are the ways we could go. How, as a coach, we can communicate and talk as an athlete and connect to allow them to have the greatest amount of success. It's easy to show the athletes where they're going, easy to make adjustments, gives boundaries to do and not go off of. So think about that. If the athlete's goal is to get stronger, and they only want to do body weight exercises, are they going to accomplish their goal of getting stronger? To a certain extent, yes, but we have to start adding external load. We have to start understanding the progressions within a structured programming. Go back to my other video about pillars of progression where we go through specifically how do we progress in the weight room. And then narrows down the options for success. Think about this. If you're going to, let's say I'm in Tampa, if I'm going to Orlando, would it be smart for me to go to St. Pete, down to Sarasota, then go track all the way back up to Orlando? No. Why? Because there's no structure to that type of directions. There would be no reason for me to go backwards to go forwards. So when we think about a structured programming approach, it gives them very few options, still variable enough for the athlete to make adjustments, but it gives them the options, but a very direct options to find success. We look at scalable programming. This means it's from youth to pro, injured to non-injured, good to bad lifters, in season to off season, weak or strong. This is for all athletes. Our programming needs to be scalable for all athletes. This means if we have a structured program, a scalable program, we can take any athlete in any situation with any constraints they may have and allow them to train and have success to allow them to actually get better at the sport that they're trying to do. Scalability is important from a mass standpoint. The more scalable, the more exercises, the more variable will allow us to train athletes better and have greater success with those athletes. Measurable programming, an all-encompassing stress accumulation. It needs to be quantifiable. Accounts for skill of the movement, accounts for cognitive stress, accounts for physical stress. If it's not measurable, when we're not showing the athlete true progress in the weight room, if we're just saying, hey, you look better, you're doing good, then we're not allowing the athlete to actually see progress. We're just telling them they're getting better. And that's sometimes we do need to do that. Be like, hey, you're getting better, you're getting better. But if we're not quantifying or measuring what we're actually trying to increase, then it's going to be really hard for the athlete to understand that they're actually getting better and where they're going. This goes back to structured and it goes back to scalable. If we have a structured program and we have a scalable program, we can measure off of those two where the athlete is and where it's going. But we have to take into account all facets of fatigue. Systematic programming. This means there's a process in place, allows for a fluid process, less coaches' involvement, more time for coaching. That means a systematic approach. We have the assessment. Again, we have the formal and informal assessments. We have the athlete value. That means where do we see this athlete at? Where do we measure this athlete from a skill level standpoint of exercises, volume standpoint, all the variables that we talked about earlier? Select a program that exercises, the sets, the reps, the volume, the frequency, all those little things. This is where those program variables come into play. Is the program selected? But we see how this is step 3 in a systematic approach. We then look at a program that is quantifiable progression. And then we see that it progress. And when something plateaus or the athlete's not having success, we go back to the assessment. We either are tracking informal or formally with these assessments, and then we reevaluate the athlete value, select a new program, do it all over again. This is where we have a systematic programming approach. Remember, we have structured, scalable, measurable, systematic. We have to run this playbook over and over and over to allow the athlete to have long-term success. We then look at optimized adaptations. So we first have to look at the sport skill. Are they sprinting? Are they jumping? Are they throwing? Are they what specifically from an athlete's sport can we increase? What adaptations will allow them to increase those specific skills to allow them to actually have success? When we think about this, how does the body move in pitching, for example? When we think about pitching in general, that body is very rotational. There's a lot of moving parts. What demands are put on the body? Scaling to individual athlete. What are the individual constraints? Does the athlete have a history of ankle injuries, knee injuries, anything like that? How do we scale within an athlete? How are we showing progression of these things? Are we measuring it? How are we measuring it? How are we going to show them that they're getting better? Again, it narrows down the focus of the program. Think about this. If everyone is playing the exact same sport, wouldn't that mean the program and the exercises and the frequency and all those things be very, very similar? Why would that be? Because they all have the same demands on the body and specific adaptations that drive success. This means that majority of sports are going to be sprinting, running, jumping. So when we think about adaptations, there's only so many things we can do from a programming standpoint to allow the athlete to actually have success and be better at their sport. At the end of the day, when we start thinking about programming, we have to start thinking about a structured, scalable, measurable, systematic, optimized adaptations approach to programming to allow athletes to have the greatest success. I highly encourage you to watch the videos on informal and formal assessments to allow you to understand how to actually assess these demands and understand how do we track these things. And remember, systems drive success, so start building.